that's when I had dramatic changes in my life. Being born again, it was basically around my wife leaving me and saying, listen, you need to shape up, and get right with God. I said, okay. We started to go to church together when she came back. It was very Pentecostal driven church, and the word in a way that I hadn't received it in the past.
The Profile. You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
Hello and welcome to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio with me, Sam Hales. This is the show where we delve into a person's life, faith and testimony. And I'm delighted to say my guest today is one of the founding members of the Black Police Association and a former superintendent, Leroy Logan. November 2020 marks 20 years since the murder of Damilola Taylor. In his recently released autobiography, Closing Ranks, My Life as a Cop, Leroy explains his role in that murder investigation and his attempts to build bridges between the police and the black community. Born in Islington to Jamaican parents, Leroy is a proud Londoner who served the Met for 30 years before his retirement in 2013. And today he continues to advise the police on knife crime and chair the charity Voyage Youth, which works with socially disadvantaged young people in order to combat low education achievement. So Leroy, welcome to the show.
Great being here. Thank you for the invite.
Tell me a little bit about early life growing up in London. What are your early memories?
Well, it was very positive, being one of two children to Jamaican parents who came over in the Windrush generation in the 50s and settling in Islington, more of the southern part of Islington near King's Cross, Caledonia Road. It wasn't perfect because, there was a lot of casual racism and, things that made life very hostile, especially from my parents in getting a home or a job, just to get in some form of livelihood. It was really difficult for them. But, they were always positive. They really were loving and nurturing parents, for me and my sister. And, we were very humble in amongst, our possessions. We very modest, to say the least, but I just felt loved and secure with parents who guided me and my sister throughout our informative years to make us the people that we are.
And was Christian faith part of that growing up, or did that come later?
Oh yeah, part of setting boundaries and giving a real clarity around right and wrong was around the Bible. And my mother was, very spiritual person. She had a real discerning eye. She'll be singing hymns. She'll go to church. She made sure my sister and myself went to church. I went to the local Boy Scouts brigade in Islington. So, I had strong Christian values.
Do you think there were any particular challenges for you just because of who you were? As a black person living in London, as a young person, were there particular hurdles looking back you think, well, that was quite particular to me and my situation I had to overcome that maybe someone else living down the street wouldn't have encountered that?
Well, actually, it was something a bit reversed because I spent a few years in Jamaica as a child between 62 and 66. And I came back to London after that short time in Jamaica. And I felt different because I'd seen a country where everyone looked like me, from the teachers to the doctors to the Prime Minister, police. So I really had a cultural immersion that I think the great majority of my peers didn't have. So that gave me a sense of optimism, hope, aspiration, that I felt confident that I would make something of myself, make my parents proud. And, I felt I'd be a good role model to my sister. So I always felt that despite the racism that I was going through, even in school, boys will be boys. It was a boys' school at the time. That's the only thing I acquiesced through peer pressure. I became a gooner, an Arsenal support, because that was the local team. But other than that, I had to speak up for myself, and if someone was trying to be, how can I say, demeaning or prejudiced or racist or whatever it may be, I knew that I came from a strong heritage which I should be proud of. And sometimes you could feel a bit beleaguered or feeling sorry for yourself, but my parents would say, listen, get on with life. It's not so much what happens to you, it's how you deal with it, and be proud of who you are, because you've seen Jamaica, you've seen where you came from. And so that helped me with dealing with racism, and not being defined by people's prejudices, and not being derailed by those prejudices or personalities. So, it kept me focused. And as a result of that, I felt that, I was in good shape to achieve my true potential.
Sounds like you were instilled with some very, as you say, very strong values. Did that open up the way for you to then consider a career in the police? Because I imagine someone who perhaps wasn't brought up with those values might have thought, well, the police isn't for me, would be massively put off by that. But it sounds like the values you were instilled with, of you can do anything, and even going to Jamaica and having that kind of experience of actually, no matter the colour of your skin, you can progress in life. Did that sort of open the way to say, actually, maybe a career in the police could be for me?
Yes, it did ultimately, but in the journey towards that, it wasn't as definitive.
Sure.
Because I when I finished my degree, I was set in being a research scientist or something to do with science or even medicine. So I went to work for the Royal Free Hospital in one of the most world-renowned medical units around gastroenterology and liver disease of one form or another. And I thought I was set. The medical science world was mine, and hopefully for the taking. In a positive way. And I really felt that was my journey, and it was through various events which caught me by the blind side, because at the Royal Free we used to have sporting facilities, and the local officers used to use our sports centre and would be in the bar, and we'd talk to them. I didn't realise they were police officers at the time because they're just in their sports gear. And it was after a matter of months, I asked them what they did, because I would see them in the gym or the pool, and I'd say what they did, and they told me they were police officers. And I thought, oh, right. And I saw the human side of it before I saw the negative side, because, even as a youngster in Islington, when I went to Highbury Grove, I'd get stopped and searched, leaving band practice in the evening, with my trumpet case and my satchel. I'm still getting stopped in my school uniform, And then my dad used to be a long distance driver, and he always used to get stopped and searched, and traffic matters, getting stopped all the time. So it wasn't a positive experience. But when they told me they were police officers, I started to reflect back, not only on the negative side, but also the positive side of seeing Black police officers in Jamaica. So it sort of, I had that sort of quantum leap back to Jamaica. I thought, wow, it is a good profession. And they started to take me on drive rounds, and it was really positive, because policing in Hampstead is totally different to policing in Hackney, because they almost police themselves. It's affluent areas, very law abiding. It was really positive, and I thought, wow, that's a good job. And then I was being assessed one of my annual appraisals, my boss, Professor Roy Pounder, and he said, Leroy, you're doing a great job. We work well together, but I don't think you're cut out for science. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I can't see you being a scientist for the next 20, 30 years. So I thought, oh, what do you think I should do? And he said, why don't you become a cop? I said, do I look like a racist stunt to you? That's my immediate thoughts. And I thought, wow, why would you say that? And he said, well, you're an outward going person. You're a people person. I really think this is something you could do. And it's set the seed of the calling, really. And even though I struggled with it, but in the end, I joined, and that went on to history making in so many ways.
Sure. Is it true that just after you put the application in for the police, your father was assaulted by 2 police officers?
Yeah. Unfortunately, he was just going somewhere. He went to the local chip shop to get some chips because he was on his lunch break, and he had parked his. It wasn't a massive Arctic lorry; it was quite a large van, really. And the officers called him out the chip shop and said, "Listen, you blocked the road." So my dad said, "Well, I park here all the time, and there are cars going through." And they said no, and they're going to report him. He said, "Fine." And he started to measure from the side of the van to the other side of the road, and they just laid into him. And I got the call. I was at the Royal Free, and I rushed to the Whittington where he had been taken, and I couldn't believe it. He was absolutely battered, black and blue. I actually walked past him because I didn't realise it was him. His face was totally contorted and swollen, and I thought, wow, why would they do that? And I sensed a hate that I've never sensed before, and I thank God for that. I wouldn't want to have that real negative energy. And obviously, I hadn't told him at the time that I'd applied, so I thought, well, forget that application; it's not going to happen. But then when I spoke to my fiancée, Gretel, as she's now still my wife, she's still putting up with me. She said, well, maybe that's the reason why you should join. I said, no, Gretel, that is not the answer I need. And maybe my boss, I told him what happened to my dad. He said, Leroy, maybe that's the reason why you should join. So what am I going to do? Just me. And then the third person who said it, I thought, this is getting boring. It was my best mate, Lee Johnny. His mother is a community activist. She's done a lot of work with the police. She'd even got the MBE for it. This was in the early 80s. And I said to Jesse, I said, listen, this is what happened to Dad. She said, listen, we need a more reflective police service, and you need to join it. And I said, Mum, that is, because I still call her Mum. I said, Mum, this is not what I need. and it just continued. And, I was really questioning my sanity. Why would I join an organisation that's beaten up my dad? It's going to be a cultural change from the science world in leafy Hampstead. And it's going to be the biggest challenge of my life. But I pursued it because I just felt I needed to do that. And even my boss said, listen, I'll keep your job open for 6 months. If it doesn't work within that time, you can always come back. Right. But, I just stuck with it.
Yeah, and a very long and successful career in the Met. So I guess looking back, no regrets.
No, I must admit, it was all for a reason. When especially having, gone through all the different stages of my life and how certain things could have changed it so differently. Because I always said, if I can get through the first 2 years, I can get through the rest, the other 28. And I thought, and there's so many stages in it. I thought this could have been so different if I hadn't stuck to that task. So I'm glad I did.
So looking back then, tell me about the kind of early years. You said it was a long time that you were a police officer in the Met. How did you find it in the first sort of months, first years?
Well, I mean, my main issue, once I did decide to join, is try and tell my dad. And unfortunately, the police told my dad before I did, because they went to visit the house because they need to check where you live and all that. But I'd actually moved into a flat with Gretel, because we were getting married and everything in 83. And wow, all of a sudden, I get this call from my dad saying there's police officers here, so you're going to join the Met. And he was upset, not just for the fact that he'd been beaten up by the Met, but I was leaving science to become a cop. And he couldn't understand that. But it was great. Ultimately, he put that aside. And again, being a great father, he saw the need to support me. And he actually took me to Hendon that first evening before I started on the 20th of June, 83. And, he said, it's a tough one, this one. And I said, Dad, listen, I just don't know how I'm going to do it, because I know my expectation was very low around the cultural challenges, because, I've seen how police interact with people on the streets. And I thought, and they're very militaristic, in uniform and everything. It's going to be a really tough challenge. And so my level of expectation was very low, actually. So the only way was up for me. And in terms of the culture and having to cope with it, I wasn't expecting them to embrace me with open arms and say how great you are or whatever. And it's great to have Black people in the organization. But, I realized I'd have to show excellence in everything I do to deter any of those prejudices or personalities. And so it was, from the first day in Hendon, I found it really alien, some of the comments. There was casual racism in the canteen, the N word, the W word, all these sort of things. And you think, come on, you're supposed to be police officers after all. I know you're a reflection of a community, but, all the same, you should have a professional standard. There were certain things that did really upset me about how public, especially the Black community, was referred to. So it wasn't just racism towards me, even though I had the N word written on my locker at one stage, because, why would a Black guy with a degree in science become a cop? It wasn't your standard sort of recruit profile. And, so that, I just found that they were really sort of quite suspicious of me. But I just kept on working in the area because I knew the area. I grew up there. I knew the people, the environment. And so I just kept going, knowing that I could be a success and I will make the most of it.
And was there a particular moment in time when you thought, right, this is now my mission to make a positive change from the inside, particularly around race? Or do you think that was always there? Was that just from the moment you went in, you just thought, actually, from early on, I know kind of what I'm called to do?
Yeah, I think the calling was around making changes from within. Because, I remember being told you can't steer a ship from the shore. You've got to be on board in the captain's cabin, changing the whole direction. But I was thinking, how am I going to do it from little old me, as it were? But even from the first stage at Hendon in our foundation course, I met up with other officers from African, Caribbean and Asian origins. And because they were doing this recruiting drive for minority ethnic recruits. So we kept in touch and, various reasons why we started to come together to say, listen, we believe we have a voice to be heard around what's happening in the organization and what's happening outside. So we set up the Black Police Association in '94 to improve the work environment of Black personnel with the intention of improving service delivery to the Black community. And so the Black Police Association was formed in September '94. And, it was during that year of forming it, that's when I had quite dramatic changes in my life and being born again. It was basically around my wife leaving me and saying, listen, you need to shape up and get right with God. I said, okay, fine. We started to go to church together when she came back. And, that really, the church was, it was very Pentecostal driven church. And, they explained the word in a way that I hadn't really received it in the past, prior to that. And so that was the first thing. And then I broke my ankle chasing a suspect in Hackney when I was a sergeant at that time. And so when you're laid up, when you're a very active person, you're laid up feeling sorry for yourself and God sort of ministers to you. So my wife's come back to me, God's laid me up and said, right, I'm going to talk to you. Now listen, there's nowhere you can go at the moment. You just have to, feel sorry for yourself, or you just get up and do some stuff. And then the final stage, so this was the first half of '94, even before we set up the BPA in September, I went to a church, Bloomsbury Baptist Church. It's literally just around the corner from Oxford Circus. And I went to see Jesse Jackson speaking at the same church that Martin Luther King spoke at in '63 when he came to, I was thinking '64, I think. Yeah, '64. when he came over. I think it was his only visit to the UK at the time, and he was speaking about Romans 12 and not to conform in this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I thought, wow, I just had that. It's still now my Rima verse that is the one that really resonates with me, and everything just dropped into place. I thought, wow, that's what I've joined, and it's not just through the Black Police Association, but to know that this is God's business. This is not a 9-to-5 weekends off type commission, and not to overinflate it, but I felt it was like a commission, my personal commission, to say, listen, what I can do to improve the organization, to make sure that we have a more cohesive society, especially working with young people. That's when I really started to see the need to work with young people to help them, because, through policing, I saw so many young people losing their sense of hope and aspiration, sometimes their lives, because of the environment they live in. And so, that was 94 was my life change.
Wow, big year. So last we heard in your story of faith was that you'd had sort of quite a strong Christian upbringing, but then, as you say, by 94, what exactly had gone wrong, I guess, in the intervening period? Because it sounds like your wife gave you a pretty direct challenge there and said, you're not right with God, we need to figure this out. And it sounds like, your marriage was on the brink of collapse. So what had gone wrong, I guess? What had happened in those intervening years of strong Christian upbringing to then get to a point where faith wasn't there, or faith had been sidelined? What happened?
I suppose it was in the back of my mind. It wasn't really my heart occupying all my heart, and I was unfortunately so consumed by the occupational culture of work in policing, which it can do if you're not very careful. You become so immersed in it. Because it's the type of job that you're dealing with people's lives. You want to show your experience, you want to succeed, and it's a very success-driven organization. So after one stage, you go on to the next stage. So it's not just promotion; it's around your lateral development. So I was thinking of going into CID. In the end, I didn't go down that route because as they said, my face didn't fit at the time. But I just felt, listen, I've got to really show. So I got too absorbed in showing how good I was at the expense of my family, and, we had 3 children by that stage. In fact, Miles, our youngest, was only a year old when Gretel decided, well, I've had enough. She just needed my attention, get my attention, really. And I need to get God's attention. Or God was saying to me, listen up, time to shape up. And it was really just being too focused on policing at expense to my first ministry, which is the family.
I want to move on and talk about, I guess, an element of your story that a lot of people kind of have a reference point for, which of course was the tragic murder of Damilola Taylor. This was actually slightly personal for you as well, wasn't it? You had a family connection to him, and then became quite involved in that case. As I understand it, part of your big push really has been to make sure that the Met Police is employing a diverse range of people. And as far as I understand it, you see that really as one of the keys to dealing with things like institutional racism. If you have people like yourself who are part of the institution, who are from minorities, that will help, I guess. So do you want to explain a little bit about that, both about Damilola Taylor, your involvement in it, but also that kind of broader, bigger picture of, you think this is a good way of dealing with some of the problems that frankly still exist today?
Well, just like I'm a great believer of showing faith in action and how it has a practical application at all aspects of our lives. I also saw that diversity in action was really important, using people's life skills, their expertise, their culture, their languages, whatever, in an operational setting. And I remember a couple of years before the tragic death of Damilola, I'd written a report. I was at Hendon at the time. I was the intake inspector and for the recruits. And I remember writing a report saying we need to use our diverse personnel in a lot more practical and operational way. And they said, yeah. And they filed it. I think it ended up in someone's bin. and it was through the death of Damilola. I was chair of the Black Police Association at the time. I was an inspector in the Met, and I went to pay my respects to the family at a memorial service. And I remember going into that church. It was in an office building in the Old Kent Road, and I saw my wife's cousin, Gretel's cousin, was sitting there. And I went up to him, I said, Kanga, what are you doing here? He said, oh, did you know Damilola is family? I said, family? He said, yeah. He explained to me that Richard, who I'd known from the 70s, when I first dated Gretel in the mid-70s, was Damilola's father. I couldn't believe it. I thought, oh my word. And I thought, wow, I mean, there's a reason for me to be here. And because obviously I'd seen it on the TV for the first couple of weeks, what was happening. And there was this wall of silence, and no one was speaking, and they weren't finding out who had seen anything and who was the suspects for the killing. While I was in that memorial service, I was approached by several people, members of the community, and even Commander Joe Kay, who was in charge of the investigation. And he said he would like me to go join a strategic group called the Go Group, which is a response to any critical incidents. And I attended. And members of the community eventually were saying, well, listen, we need to have officers to help with the house to break down this wall of silence. And they all looked at me. I thought, and I just felt this sense of, I can do this, similar to, when I was a youngster in Jamaica, I can do this. It's a can-do thing. And being part of the police is a can-do organization, which can absorb you too much, as I described earlier. But I just felt I can do this. And I brought in a cadre of black officers who, I had handpicked to ensure that they would integrate seamlessly into the homicide investigation team. And they were assigned with house to house where white officers had gone to, and they didn't even open the door, much less find out who's in there, what they saw, and were they willing to make a statement. But we're literally within hours, I think less than 2 hours, I was on the radio, listening to radio, and two officers, Debbie Akinlawan, who's chair of the Christian Police Association in London, or she was, but I'd like to think she still is. She said, they've allowed me to go into the house, and I'm speaking to the occupants, and they're telling us so much. So when we had a debrief, our first debrief, it was just, thank you, God. I mean, this could have gone so wrong, but the impact of faith in action and diversity in action all was mixed in, showing its practical application. And it eventually helped to identify the suspects and, the final conviction, even though there was a mistrial on first attempt. But,
so this was, was this as, quote unquote, as simple as just, if someone comes to your door who looks like you, speaks like you, I don't know, uses certain language, you're more likely to open the door and speak to them as a police officer? Is it really as simple as that? Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And that's what I mean. Policing is not rocket science. It's just overcomplicated by people with this performance culture and thinking that there is a one size fits all. But you just need to widen your mind that actually policing, as it says in the Beatitudes, we're peacemakers. And as a result of being sons and daughters of God, we need to understand it's all about relationships. It's all about loving people and having that pastoral understanding. It's not about feeling collars and blue lights and sirens and kicking indoors. It's around understanding how you as a public servant serve the needs of the public. And that's all it was.
Do you want to stay informed on the best of what's happening in the UK church today? Premier Christianity magazine is for you. The UK's leading Christian magazine is published every month and features interviews with Christian leaders, in-depth reporting, reviews, columnists, and loads more. And best of all, you can try it for free. Head to our website now to request the latest edition worth £5.95, completely free of charge.
Visit premierchristianity.com/free sample.
There'll be people listening to this who have very different perception of stop and search, mainly because they haven't experienced it. And they will say, well, I see these stories on the news, and as far as I can tell, if the police suspect someone of doing something wrong, they can stop them and they can search them. What's wrong with that?
Well, it's been a big issue from the sus law days. As I said, as a youngster myself, I used to be stopped and searched in my school uniform, coming from band practice in the evening, and a lot of it was not based on intelligence to say, listen, you've been pointed out, or we've seen you in possession of something that looks illegal, or you've been hanging around an area where there's known drugs or whatever. It was just your skin color defined the way in which you're going to get stopped and how they would speak to you, because they weren't very polite. And I suppose that has been passed on from generation to generation. Even though my parents used to say, be positive, don't let those things get you down. But some people, they do get a sense of animosity and frustration and anger, and it can flare up from time to time. And I think what makes it more volatile is when people feel they're being stopped, not because of information or some form of intelligence that's come to the officer's attention, but it's because of the color of the skin. And the figures play that out. Stop and search has always been an issue of you're 9 to 10 times more likely to be stopped because you're black than you're white. You're more likely to be tasered if you're black than you're white. You're more likely to be involved in some sort of aggressive form of handling by the officers. You're going to be charged and kept in custody more likely if you're black than you're white. So all these sort of things does create, a sense of even extra anger. And because stop and search in itself is a very humiliating thing. I mean, I was stopped about 2 months after retiring. I was going to a youth event, and I was in Southeast London in Camberwell, and I got stopped because they said I overtake a horse and cart. Well, you don't have to be driving fast to overtake a horse and cart, but it's just the way in which the officers were speaking to me until they found out who I was, and they thought, right. Oh, well, thank you very much, sir, and all that sort of stuff. But but there's a lot of people who get stopped on a regular basis, and they sense, well, I haven't got a knife, I haven't got any drugs, I haven't got anything, but you're stopping me on a regular basis. Sometimes there's a marker on the car to say maybe that person's associated with drugs or weapons, and they're getting stopped all the time. And now with social media, there is this constant barrage of video footage of black people not only being stopped, but handcuffed even before they're even searched. It doesn't seem to be intelligence-based, because a lot of them are being released afterwards for there's no reason for the original stop. So, it's only 1 out of 10 stops actually result in something. And so that just creates a growing frustration and anger, which, they really need to acknowledge at this most senior level and do something about it, and not just say nice words, do something.
It's been said before, I think particularly around some of the terrible stuff we've seen in America, but I think it applies here as well, that it's been said before, it's not that the police have suddenly got a lot worse around these issues. The difference now is that people are filming it. The difference now is that we have evidence of the passerby in the street getting their mobile phone out. I mean, again, some of the awful footage we've seen in America, we've only seen that because of the invention of the smartphone, frankly, and people taking initiative and thinking, I'm going to try and hold my local police officers to account when they do terrible things. In the past, those things may well have happened. It's just we never would have seen them on TV.
Yeah, I think it was like the Rodney King beating, and that sparked off the LA riots. If it wasn't for the fact that someone just happened to be videoing from their house, I'm not sure if it was a mobile phone, because this was sort of mid-90s and mid to late 90s. It really was a defining moment. But you've got so many defining moments now. But for me, the George Floyd killing was so painful to watch, because I shared the blue surge like that officer. I was a public servant, as he should be. And he showed just some cold, calculated action of such a sustainable way that you think that's inhuman to do that. You shouldn't even do that to an animal, much less a human. I mean, if it was a dog laying there, I'm telling you, there'd be some really upset people, you know. He would never do that to a dog, you know. And why a human being? And it's because of the way in which they see black men. Because a lot of black men, in certain white people's eyes, is a fearful image. You know, they do fear black men. I remember patrolling in plain clothes in Hackney and in Islington, and some white members of the public would cross the road or hold their bag a bit closer or something, because they've had this image of a black man walking down the road, must be trouble. And police officers, unfortunately, are a lot the way, think a lot of the same way, rather. And I think it's, you know, these things are learned. It's not like you got a prejudiced DNA or, you know, a racist chromosome. You've got to have learned that. And I think it's around having proper conversations around how this thing can end up. And I think George Floyd has been a real learning opportunity for so many of us right across the world. And I'd like to think this movement will continue. And it's not going to be just a moment of saying, oh, that's really bad. But it's going to be a movement of conversations and really being proactive to not only say, well, I'm not racist. Well, you've got to prove it, and prove it to yourself and others. And also, how do you challenge other people who may be, and don't be passive? Because I think silence is complicity.
After the death of Stephen Lawrence and the Met was declared institutionally racist, when that news came, was that, you know, what was your reaction to that? Did you think, well, of course, you know, I have personal experience of this, or was that still a bit of a shock?
Well, having been one of the 3 BPA members who gave evidence at the McPherson inquiry to say that the police were institutionally racist, and gave evidence of internal dynamics around recruitment, retention, progression, because, you know, even though we get people into the organization, but, you know, officers are 4 to 5 times more likely to be leaving the organization if they're black than they're white, more than likely to be subject to discipline than their white colleagues, finding that, you know, they're not going through the ranks as they should, etc. And then at the same time, around stop and search and all the other indicators that I spoke about earlier. So we gave evidence and say that is an institutionally racist organization. So I wasn't shocked that it came out in the report. In fact, I remember when we gave evidence, you could see the panelists, Lord McPherson and the other panelists, were really sort of so positive, because they, you know, and I heard afterwards, they were so happy that someone had actually given them a real lens into the organization. It was clear that austerity had a massive impact around the McPherson recommendations. So from 1999 to 2009, 2010, we were seeing some real improvements internally, externally. But after that, when austerity kicked in that 2010 till now, there's been that disconnect. So we've actually gone backwards. And I think that's why so many people say, well, it's not useful now, because I think they have to recognize that they've actually gone backwards. So all the improvements in the first 10 years since the McPherson recommendations were issued in February 99 has been eroded by the last 10 years. Wow. Through austerity. And dare I say the B word, Brexit, you know, that seems to have emboldened a lot of people in the public, because hate crime has gone through the roof. And as I said, police officers are a reflection of the public, and you can see how it plays out on the streets on a regular basis. So I think, you know, we need to recognize that we are at a defining moment, and I think that's why the Black Lives Matter and you know, the movement of change through George Floyd, we really need to make it count. And we've gone backwards 20 years. like a pre-McPherson era, which I don't want my grandchildren to go through, like my children went through, or even my generation went through.
It's very obvious, hopefully should be obvious to anyone, that of course you can be a police officer and you can be a black man, and there's not a contradiction there. But at the same time, going back to what you were saying about the video of the George Floyd death and the emotions that brought up, have there been times where those two parts of your identity have felt conflicted in some way? As yes, of course I'm proud to be black. Yes, of course I'm proud to be a police officer. But actually, what I hear from others, or what I see in the media, or when I look at the George Floyd death, actually these two elements of my identity feel like they're intentional, feel like they're contradicting in some way. Has that been a struggle for you at all?
No, because when I had to go through a lot of inventory, especially after my dad got assaulted, and I thought, why would I still join? And it was clear to me from that first instance, before I even stepped foot on police premises, before I became a recruit, I had to say clearly, I'm a black man who happens to be a cop. What that does, that makes sure that you're going into the organisation to integrate and not to assimilate the cultural norms and values. So you integrate with your beliefs and values to work as a team, to work successfully, to carry out the policies and procedures of the Met, and to improve it if it's not fit for purpose. So I never felt any sort of contradiction as a black man or as a Christian, because for me, key part of policing is that pastoral element, that real empathy and advocacy for people, not just seeing people as potential prisoners, but maybe a potential patient or a potential need for help in a way that it might not be, all right, fill out this form or I'll deploy assets. It might be, they just need your time. So for me, it's always been a seamless process. There's never been a contradiction. I've always felt, as a black man, I'm representing my community, and I want to make sure that my presence is felt in a positive way. I want to bring people with me and work together. And I still have that sense of public service even now, because I think once it's in your veins, you never lose it.
You write in the book, though, that some people have seen you as a lone wolf or a maverick. Why is that?
Because I am. I suppose when you've got a clarity of who you are, what you're there to do. And even, I'm not into misplaced loyalties. I never have been. I've got a group of school friends I went to High Grove School with. I can count on one hand. I'm not a sort of person that I have to have loads of friends. For me, especially on social media, that doesn't define me. I know some people get defined by how many likes you get and how many followers you have. For me, it doesn't matter. If I've got one follower, it doesn't bother me. If I've got 1,000, great, but it doesn't define me. So I've always been. I think I just got it from my dad. My dad always said, be a lone wolf. You've got to think for yourself. Don't get caught up in peer pressure. Or, he used to talk about social seaweed, people who just sort of go with the direction of the tide, and they just flop from one side to another. Don't get into this mass hysteria. Think for yourself, especially when the heat is on, and be a cool head when other people are losing theirs.
But the publicity that's attached to your book says that you've made some powerful allies, but also some enemies along the way. So who are the enemies?
Well, anyone who sees me put my head above the parapet to speak out around institutional racism and the fact that, I have had to name and shame from time to time. I'll challenge home secretaries, prime ministers, commissioners, mayors. I'll do it in a positive, constructive, evidence-based way. If I see something's wrong, I just cannot sit back.
Sure. I noticed on Twitter just the other day, you were talking about Dame Cressida Dick, the Met's commissioner. She's shelved the Stephen Lawrence case, and you said on Twitter she doesn't care. Is that really true or fair?
Well, how it comes across to me. I know Cress 20 years when she came back to the Met as a commander, And she, in fact, she was doing a lot of work with the Lawrence family, and working with a deputy assistant commissioner at the time, John Greaves. So they, did a lot around leading it, but it's just the way in which she's put certain things across around, well, you don't have to tell anyone you're going to reduce the number of officers or make it just a review process. You don't have to tell people. You can do that if you want to. And the timing, I thought, was terrible, during the Black Lives Matter movement and everything. Why would you want to do that now? Maybe in a year's time.
Well, it sounds like in that case, she does care. It's just been poorly communicated.
I think she doesn't really care about all the communities and the impact, and unfortunately, CRES has, still got, especially minority communities, still see her with a certain amount of suspicion because of the John Charles Menendez case, the Stockwell shooting in 2005. So, it is something that she needs to recognize, that people have got long memories. And then certain things she'll say again. I remember she was being interviewed by Channel 4 a couple of weeks ago, and they quoted that tweet you just highlighted. And you could see that she wasn't happy. But she was not all, she even said, well, trust and confidence in the Black communities is good, but it's not. It's the lowest it's been for decades, especially in Black communities where they're over-policed and under-protected. And for her to say that trust and confidence is good is either she's in denial or she's telling a lie. And for me, all those things don't show that care that she needs to show. So
if you were in her position, and given all you've just said about trust being an all-time low, what are the a handful of things you could say you could do that tomorrow and that would start improvements? What would be the sorts of things you'd recommend to say, look, trust is really low between the police and Black people. This is, it goes without saying, if that continues, that leads to some very, very dangerous situations for society. It's really important we get good communication going again. What were the sorts of things you could sort of recommend that could be done overnight that might begin to then turn the tide on that?
Well, I think that sort of changing our narrative would be really good. I wouldn't be making big headlines about, the war on drugs and the war on knives, because, there is some big issues around all of those things. People don't just, again, wake up saying, I'm going to stab someone. It's the environment. It's the trauma they're going through. Recognize that so many people, especially young people, are suffering from adverse childhood experiences, toxic stress, wider community stress. So, we need to understand that we're not going to rush our way out the problem. We also need to let the reassignment of assets. So police are not necessarily called to every single call to do with, someone is suicidal or someone is suffering from a drug overdose or, exclusions from schools. We don't need to be called to those things. And I would build back our safer schools officers to work with schools to reduce the exclusions. Because once you exclude a child, you might as well write the date when they're going to the prison system. So you need to reestablish back those connections with the community. And I think it's also around, officers who are seen to be road cops. They've got to show that they will sanction them. If they're not going to respond positively through a development plan, they've got to be sanctioned. We cannot allow road cops to carry out and feel they're untouchable and unaccountable, and the organization is doing nothing about it or is seen to be doing nothing about it. And I think, as I said, don't see institutional racism as a burden, see it as an aspiration. Really say, okay, we've seen the recommendations, we're going to run with those recommendations, because what gets measured gets done. We're going to make sure we have independent oversight so that we're not seen as being self-serving. And, for me, it's around showing that strong leadership and being present. One of the best things I saw from a senior officer was a guy called Tim Godwin. He was a deputy commissioner at one stage, but when he was a deputy assistant commissioner, he went into Brixton and he had this town hall type meeting. And it was the most amazing thing I saw. he took the hard questions, he took the tempers and the anger and, people getting really frustrated with him, but he sat there and took it, and he came out successful. I would like to see the commissioner doing those sort of things, say, listen, I know you might have a perception of me, but I'm willing to sit here and have some conversation with some real tough people to say, listen, we might have to agree to disagree, but let's at least have the conversation.
Yes. Just zooming out a little bit here, what is it about the police specifically that seems to have attracted so many issues, both in the UK and the US, to do with race? Because, of course, I want to say racism exists in all parts of society. I'm sure, there are massive issues of racism in my industry, in the media, and other places. Nevertheless, it does seem like the police has, for whatever reason, an awful lot of problems in this area. Is there something about, I don't know, the kinds of people who go into the police that it attracts a particularly, I don't know, aggressive kind of personality trait? What is it? How do we explain that both in the US and the UK, it's the police where racism seems to be such a huge issue? Why that might be the case.
I don't know why the police was set up in the first place. It was there to protect the haves from the have-nots. And, it does attract people with quite strong views around, the them and us. What it should be a we, because as publics, that's why they changed the name from police force to police service to try and break down that mindset. Because as I said, the strong occupational culture does give that sort of, it's a them and us, and we'll deal with them if they get in our way, that sort of thing. I think it's also the fact that those type of quite intolerant people do not celebrate diversity. So they don't even deal with minority groups within their ranks well. So don't expect them to do it well with members of the public. And I think there needs to be, but people are very good at joining the organization and seem to be very objective. But I saw it as an intake manager in the 90s when I was in charge of recruits. And I saw them transform from this objective person within 2 or 3 weeks. They've got the swagger, they've got all the narrative, the slangs and everything. And you think they're like old sweats. I've only got 3 weeks in the job, not 13, 13 years or whatever. It's quite amazing how quick that change was.
I wonder if there's something about having power as well. If you suddenly put in a uniform, especially if you're quite young, is there an element of the power going to your head a little bit? And I suppose, a faith element here would be quite helpful in saying, what is your role in life? Is it to be a powerful person, or is it to be a servant?
Yeah, well, to be honest, the control element is a key bit, because a lot of people like having that sense of control and power. And when you put that toxic mix with racism, or prejudice, and the power can lead to racism. And of course, it can have it on a large scale where the organization not dealing with it. And that's where you get institutional racism. When you get these small things, these micro aggressions into larger aggressions, and it's been allowed to manifest and proliferate throughout the organization. So the control and power piece. And some people can't cope with it because, once they leave the organization, they don't have that power. They think they're lost. Well, for someone as a Christian, I know God is the power in my life. So whether I'm in the police service or not, I have that sense of empowerment, and, in him we trust.
Well, as I say, the book is out now. It's called Closing Ranks. But also, just to say that your story is going to be featuring on the BBC this December in an episode of Steve McQueen's Small Axe. It's a 6-part series. And is it right that John Boyega is playing you, Leroy?
Yes, he is. Yes. If someone said to me 4 years ago when I started this project with them that, I'd have John playing me, I was like, serious? Even though I met John many years earlier, when he was just starting his career with the film Attack on the Block. So yeah, it's really amazing. And, I just give God thanks for letting that be at a time when, my labor of love of the book is coming out at the same time as the film. And, I'm just hoping it will help to have those conversations I speak about, and let us all be more active citizens.
Yeah. John Boyega, as you say, I mean, he's really done some huge films recently. Star Wars is probably the last film I saw him in.
Yeah.
Have you been involved at all in the kind of crafting of episodes? Did you get to visit the set or anything like that?
Yeah, I did all that. I was very active in drawing up the script.
Amazing.
Script writers, went to the set. It wasn't the most luxurious set in the world. You know, it was in sunny Wolverhampton because they wanted to recreate London in the 80s, and London has been transformed over the last 30 years. So certain parts of Wolverhampton does sort of reflect that sort of scene. And, John not only adopted the uniform, but also some of my own personal dress sense from the 80s. So my one of my closest friends from school, Charlie Allen, he's a tailor, used to make my clothes for me. And so they had to go, I referred them back to him so that John could be well sort of suited and booted by Charlie Allen. So yeah, it was great just seeing that and being involved in it. And it's a real sort of family affair. You know, I've got so many friends involved. Yeah, I can't wait until it comes out, and I'd like to think it's going to be a good end to the year because 2020 has been very challenging so far.
Well, they do say the book is always better than the film. So why not get a hold of the book now? It's called Closing Ranks by Leroy Logan. And then look out for the 6-part BBC series coming to, I don't know if it's BBC One or BBC Two, but it's coming in December. BBC One. Fantastic. Yeah. BBC One this December. It's called Small Axe. Leroy, thank you so much for talking. It's been a real pleasure. I appreciate your time.
No, I've really enjoyed it. And thanks to your listeners for tuning in.
As Leroy says, thank you so much for joining us on The Profile. It's been great to have your company. Do hope you enjoyed that conversation. We'll be back same time, same place next week. See you then.